Erev Tov, everyone. Chodesh Tov. I think we're the only shul in the world that makes sure consistently that we have the signs up, which you meant to say in the day before the day comes in. So, Yalev Yavo, that's for Arvit tonight. That's just okay. In any event, we started talking last night about with the return of the hostages, with Hashem, what bracha would one say when hearing this news, wonderful news? I saw that there was even a blog post dedicated to last night's shares. Must have done something right. So, but anyway, we started talking about what is the bracha that should be said, what's appropriate. So we saw maybe you might think Matira Surim. We said that is one of the brachot we say Bekot HaShachar, but that's not actually anything to do with captives being released, ironically enough. I thought about something that I mentioned that earlier in the war, with one of the, at one point where the hostages were released, one of the anchors put on a chala. Because if the person was saying it, he had to put on the kippah to say his bracha. We assume that he's not observant. So he wasn't davening that morning. So we all have an obligation to say the bracha for Bekot HaShachar every day. So he hadn't said it that day. He said it there and had in mind for the chatufim. Okay, but it was not a bracha levatala. But in any event, if you have said it in the morning, which I would assume everybody here has, we wouldn't say it again on that. So then we spoke about Shechianu. Again, all of this is based on the tshuva that Rav Rimon published. So he says we have a din of Shechianu when you see somebody you haven't seen for 30 days, or if you haven't seen them for 12 months, you would say Machei Meitim. Okay, you weren't sure they were alive. That would certainly be the case for the families of the hostages when they see them. What about, we said, if you see somebody the first time ever, you've never seen them. So not only have you not seen them for 30 days, but you've never seen them before. So despite there is one case where we would say such a bracha, that is when a person has a baby girl. And he says the bracha, upon seeing her the first time, he says the bracha of Shechianu. Okay, and what we understand from that is that it depends on how happy you are at seeing this individual. Generally speaking, even if it's somebody you know and you've never met, you've had correspondence, whatever, you're happy to see them, it's the first time. Shulchan Aruch says, no, you don't say the bracha of Shechianu. So maybe there's what to talk about. But because with the way you said it, the verse. That's yeah. But in any event, but over here, for our Le'inyanenu, none of this is really relevant because most people are not actually seeing the hostages when they return. You might see them on TV, you might see a recording, whatever. So we would not be able to say the bracha based on that. However, and this is where we ended off last night, and this is where we'll pick up now. There is another case of saying the bracha of Shechianu on a shmuah tova. When I hear something, when I hear this very, very good news or good tidings, as we say, you would say the bracha of Shechianu. This is the Gemara in Brachot, really the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, Alag Shamim v'alabsorot tovot omer baruch hatov v'ameitiv. Okay, we'll get into a moment the difference between Shechianu versus hatov v'ameitiv. But essentially, the Mishnah says you say the bracha for hearing good things, and v'al shmot ra'ot omer dayan ha'emet. For hearing bad things, we say dayan ha'emet, which is the bracha that we say right at a funeral, so based on that, so it's not a din of seeing a person for the first time in 30 days, but hearing good news. What would qualify as more than a shmuah tova than hearing that these hostages who we've been davening for and we've been praying for and we've been hoping for, that they are being released after this time? And certainly one could say Shechianu in terms of that, out of that halakha. Then the question comes up. So somebody asked me, there's still another couple of points to this. Somebody asked me last night, I see he's not here tonight, I hope he's watching on Zoom. What about Hatova HaMeitiv, right? Why don't we say, because what's the difference between Shechianu and Hatova HaMeitiv, which we saw in the Mishnah? The Mishnah says the bracha to say is Hatova HaMeitiv. So we generally speaking say the following. We say that when you make a new purchase, right, or you something which you are excited about, if it's something which benefits you, and only you, the bracha is Shechianu. But if it's something which benefits you and benefits other people as well, then the bracha is Hatova HaMeitiv. So for example, a person buys a new car, right? That's the question is asked. Again, we spoke about this on Shavuot. If you buy a new car, what bracha should you say? So if you're the only person who's using the car and you live by yourself or whatever, you would say family and everyone's going to benefit from it. So the appropriate bracha would be Hatova HaMeitiv. So would that be the case yeah, this is obviously the hostages are released. It's not just, me, Ploni Almoni, who's never even met them, who's happy about it. Everybody's happy. All of Am Yisrael is benefiting from this. So there is a Shuta Rashba. Shuta Rashba writes the following. He says there is a limitation. He says the bracha v'tov ha'meitiv is only a bracha we say when there is a physical, tangible benefit, as opposed to Shechianu, where it's called a spiritual benefit or whatever, right? The example is you see your friend. You see your friend after 30 days. If both of you are happy about it, so it's something which affects not just you, it affects somebody else. Why there do we not say the bracha v'tov ha'meitiv? And maybe it's got to do with this point that it's not necessarily a physical. I'll read you the words of the Rashba. He says, when it comes to the bracha of atov v'hameitiv, he says, "Ela b'davar sheyesh lo to'elet v'hana'a bo v'lacharim imo." So it's something which provides benefit, right, to you and to others. And the example the Mishnah gave was Yeridat Kshamim, when the rain falls. Okay, that's something that's this physical, tangible benefit from that. Or Yerushat HaKrovim, a person received an inheritance. Aval b'hana'a levad b'riyat perot chadashim lo matzinu. It says when there is no physical benefit from it, but it's sort of right. You've just seen a new fruit, for example. There we don't say tov ha'meitiv. Okay, and there we would say Shechianu. So there's a big discussion in the poskim, the Rishonim, the Achronim, based on this Rashba. Some agree with the Rashba, some disagree with the Rashba. Can the bracha v'tov ha'meitiv apply where there is not a physical, tangible benefit? Everybody agrees that Shechianu you could still say. So the Mishnah Berurah, for example, says no, like in such a case you should say Shechianu. Everybody also agrees, by the way, that to a certain extent the brachot of Shechianu and Tov HaMeitiv are not quite interchangeable. But if I was meant to say Tov HaMeitiv and I said Shechianu instead, so I've still fulfilled my obligation. That's okay. I can still satisfy the bracha that way. So therefore, based on those factors, many poskim say better in these kind of circumstances to say Shechianu rather than to say Tov HaMeitiv. There is one more factor which would add to it in favor of Shechianu, which is the following. We all know that we have a principle throughout Hilchot Brachot called Sfeik Brachot La'akel. So when you have a doubt about whether your bracha should be said or bracha should not be said, in the case of doubt, we don't say the bracha, Sfeik Brachot La'akel. One exception to that rule, one bracha, which is an exception to that rule, not according to everybody, but according to the Bach, with a very, very significant posek, the Bach writes that when it comes to Shechianu, we are not concerned about Sfeik Brachot La'akel. That is a bracha, it's called a bracha of Rashut. Essentially, the reason is because Shechianu is dependent on Simchat HaLev. It's dependent on a person's subjective feeling. The person's very, very happy and they're allowed to say Shechianu. So based on all those factors together, everyone says that would be the bracha that we would say in the situation would be Shechianu. Okay, now there's one more question which we have to solve, which is, again, we alluded to this a little bit on Shabbat as well, which is the following. Obviously, everybody is very, very happy, overjoyed at every hostage that comes back. Okay? Unfortunately, we know that it's not so simple. That's not the only thing that's happening. There's a tremendous price that needs to be paid for this. And again, I'm not getting into politics. It's not our purpose here. And whether you support the deal or don't support the deal, it doesn't matter. But there is a tremendous price that's being paid. There are terrorists that are being released. There is great concerns. So the question, first of all, he says the question is maybe on the fact, just as we are happy, we said on a Besorat Tovah, on Shmot Tovot we have a bracha, and on Shmot Ra'ot we also have a bracha. So at the same time, as happy as we are about the hostages that are coming home, we have a bracha to say. Maybe should we say the bracha of Dayan Emet about the fact the terrible news that all these terrorists are being released. So there is no, we're not really providing any sources, but he essentially says the minhag nowadays is that the bracha of Dayan Emet, we don't say that. We don't say that with Shem and Malchut. The only case where we say the bracha of Dayan Emet is a person has a funeral, one of their close relatives, and then they would say the bracha. He says you could say Dayan Emet without Shem and Malchut. He recommends we could say extra Tehillim. It's always a good thing to do, good thing to say. But we wouldn't say that. But then the question is, going back to the case of Shechianu, meaning if we were saying that our simcha is not complete, there are terrible things that are happening as well. Does that take away, does that mitigate from the fact that we say the Shechianu as well? So we have the case in the Gemara, in Brachot, Daf Nun Tet Amud Aleph. It's also brought to Halacha in the Shulchan Aruch. I've never seen anybody actually do this in practice. There was discussion about this last week after everyone wrote this psak, and there was discussion. One of the groups one of the rabbinic forums that I'm in, somebody asked, everybody knows this halacha, but he said, have you ever seen anybody who's done it in practice? And the answer was no, nobody's ever seen it, but it's the halacha. The halacha is, sure, we're all thinking ahead of me, the Gemara says the following, it says, Tashma meit aviv v'hu yorshom. So a person's father dies, and he receives a large inheritance. Okay, so there is bad news here. Again, the point is, one doesn't cancel out the other. Both of those things exist, and both of those things exist simultaneously. The person has received very, very bad news that his father's passed away, and at the same time, he's received very, very good news about the fact that he's become wealthy. Okay, so it says, this is the Gemara, it says, Met aviv v'hu yorshom. But Chila Omer Baruch Dayan HaEmet. Okay, so first you say Dayan HaEmet over the passing of one's relative. Ulebasof Omer Baruch HaTov HaMeitiv. But he also says HaTov HaMeitiv or Shliach or whatever it is about the good news that comes together. And that's what the Shulchan Aruch says. Shulchan Aruch says Reish Kaf Gimel Sif Bet Meit Aviv Mevarech Dayan HaEmet Haya Lo Mamon She'alsho Im Eino Achim Mevarech Gam Ken Shechianu Im Yesh Achim Mevarech Shechianu Bimkom Shechianu Mevarech HaTov HaMeitiv. Says the Shulchan Aruch, the father passed away, you say Dayan HaEmet, there was a great inheritance. This is what we said before. If the inheritance was just for you, you say Shechianu. If the inheritance was for you and your siblings, you say Hatov HaMeitiv, because they also benefited. Okay, it's a very, very strange, perplexing Gemara to get our heads around. As I say, no one's done it. No one really does it in practice nowadays. Maybe because the Yerusha is not big enough anymore. I don't know. But the point is, what we see from this, and this is what we spoke about on Shabbat, that yes, we live with complex emotions, and there are positive things and there are negative things that happen at the same time, and one does not nullify the other. But I can celebrate the good and I can mourn the bad at the same time. And therefore, based on that, so says Rav Rimon, yes, we are frightened and anxious and upset and concerned about the negative parts of this that are happening, but we have to celebrate the good that's happening as well. And therefore, we can still say, even with all the dangers and everything else, the fact that the hostages are coming back, that in and of itself is tremendously positive. And over that, we would say, the bracha of Shechianu. One thing which he doesn't address over here, I was thinking about, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but when we have a situation like this, whereby, if all the hostages were coming back on one day, so then it would be, we would say the bracha, you'd say the bracha once, and that was it. But when it's happening, every week or 2 days, like it's meant to be, for example, this week, they say that they're going to release 3 tomorrow, and then hopefully they're going to release another 3 on Shabbat, whatever it is. So are we going to say every single time, every pe'imah, every time you'd say bracha of Shechianu again? Why not? Okay, so I think that's the answer. The question is, again, it's about Simchat HaLev, and it could be that if it's something that we get used to, so to speak, and a person doesn't feel, whatever. But if, as you say, if each time, and I think, I agree with you. I don't think we get used to it.
The news on the radio. You say the bracha then, or do you have to wait until you actually have something, a delightful scene of a reunion? I mean, you can't say it twice, presumably, on the same.
So you wouldn't say it twice on the same thing, right? But you say, so again, what we're saying is everything here is really going on the subjective. It's going on the Simchat HaLev. So if when I hear that news, that makes me very, very excited, right? So then I would say the bracha. If I hear it and I say, okay, well, I'm not so sure. No, when I see the pictures, then I'll know. So what one could. In answer to your question, if one could hear the news, one could wait until they've seen the pictures and then say the bracha. That would also be fine. So Bezrat Hashem, all the hostages should come back, and all the good things should happen. It's Chodesh Shvat, shenitpaseh b'sorot tovot, and Yeshuvot v'nechamot v'geula shlema. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha אומר, HaKadosh Baruch Hu לזכות ישראל, לפנות לך בעל אמצעות מצוות, שני מעדני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיר תורה